Okay, so we are recording. Does anybody have any questions?
So for the midterm, we're able to bring in one sheet of paper, double-sided with written notes, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Is that Ishmael trying to talk?
I think Ishmael is still on mute.
Okay.
So I guess one of the issues that I kind of still have problem with is probably the casting of the types.
Okay.
It's really like a trial and error for me, and not really understanding it to get it on the first go.
Okay. One of Java's religious principles is that it is a safe language. And when it comes to what it will cast for you under the covers and what it requires you to do explicitly, it is best understood with Java being a safe language.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Where do I want? I'll just pull up my play project. And we'll walk through some stuff.
Okay.
And oh, come on, you stinking machine. Is this big enough, or do I need to make this bigger?
If you make it just a little bit bigger.
Okay. And is that better?
Yes.
I don't know why that didn't say public. And I'll go in and put a main in. So let's first take the ints, the integers. Now a byte is 1 byte. A short is 2 bytes. An int is 4 bytes. Okay, and let's see, a long is 8 bytes.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first question you ask is, what are the safe conversions? So I'll just initialize it to something. It's a dangerous thing to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are the safe conversions that we could do here? Well, you can always put 1 byte into 2 bytes, or 2 bytes into 4, or 4 into 8, right? You can always go into a bigger container,
Okay.
if you will. So anytime I'm doing that, Java's going to be perfectly happy. So I can put a byte into a short and it does that without complaining, but I can't go the other way. A 2-byte value might be too big to fit into 1 byte. And even though in this case it's not, Java doesn't trust me a bit. And so I can't say byte equal short.
Okay.
Now what I can do here is I can explicitly cast it. And that's byte. And we have someone else joining us. Welcome. We are discussing widening and what can be widened by default and what has to be explicitly casted. And the meeting is being recorded, just to let everybody know. So if I'm going from something longer into something shorter, I have to explicitly cast it because Java says, well, that's not safe and dummy, I'm not going to let you do that. If we explicitly cast it, then the programmer is giving a promise to Java. Dear Java, I know this looks strange because I'm trying to take something that's bigger than what the destination can hold it, but trust me, it's okay. And that's kind of what's going on there. And with these primitives, we'll be okay. The cast will work. We will get into some things later which are not primitives, like strings are not primitives, and JText fields are not primitives. And when we start casting those, yes, it will compile, but it will be checked at runtime and may blow up there.
Okay.
So we okay so far?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any trouble so far with what we're? And welcome, Ricardo. Have people been able to find the chat facility?
Let's see.
Anyway, we can use that for questions or comments if you don't want to jump in by audio. So that's the principle. Now let's talk about some other data types, the floating points. And one is float, and it is for, well, what did I just do? It is 4 bytes. The other one is double, and it is 8 bytes. And I haven't really played with these very much, so this will be fun. So, oh, that's a reserved word. So I would expect this to work, but I would expect this to fail. And it does because it cannot convert automatically from double to float. So let's see, this one needs an explicit cast, and this one needs an explicit, needs a better speller. And I can cast that that way. Welcome, Carter. So we're talking about casting and what can be done, what widening can be done automatically, and when we need to cast explicitly. Now, so we okay? Any questions so far?
Rick
Hello.
Is now joining.
Hello, Rick. By the way, everybody, I am recording the call. So we okay so far? Any questions there? And we'll move on to how the floats and the ints work. Same principle, but we'll just talk about it a little bit. Okay. So the difference between one of these integer types and one of these floating point types, and I should put types there, is that these floating point types can have a fractional portion. So they could be 5.2 and 6.4. And why is that? And literals are by default double. So I'll have to explicitly cast that one. And there is a way I can make that a floating point. Yes. Put here, that turns it into a float literal instead of the type there. Now, now these integers are just, think of them as positive or negative whole numbers or zero. There's no fractional portion. These floating point types can have a fractional portion. So the same question about safety comes up. What is the safe conversion? And Java will do that for us, but it will not do something that might be unsafe. So for instance, these floats and doubles can always have a 0.0 as their fractional portion. So if I have, say, an int, I can turn that into a double. That's safe, but the reverse is not. Even if I go with a long, which is 8 bytes, and I try to assign it to a floating point, which is only 4 bytes, it won't let me do that because Java says, hey, this float might have a fractional portion to it, and there's no way to store that in a type that doesn't have a fractional portion. So this is a case where I would need to make my explicit cast, which again is a promise from the programmer to Java. I know this looks weird, but trust me, I know what I'm doing. It'll be all right. So does this answer the question?
Yes, helps a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. What else? I will say that with the static methods lesson behind us, I know at the beginning, lots of people are really nervous about all this boilerplate up here about writing a program. And I would say, just trust me, and by week 10, you'll know what every symbol in there means and its significance and so forth. We're almost there. we've been writing static methods, and main is just a static method. It doesn't return anything, so it's void. And this is a formal parameter, sometimes called a parameter, depending on which set of terminology you use. Programmers don't agree on anything. And the only thing here is this type of the formal parameter, which we will hit when we do arrays, the lesson after the midterm. So you should be feeling a whole lot more comfortable with what all this stuff is that you need to start writing your program. So if there are any questions about that, please let me know. Anybody else have a question? Who has done the programming practice?
I haven't yet.
Okay.
I guess I should look at it.
Well, this is your biggest challenge on the programming practice is, I'm sorry? I wasn't able to pick that up. The biggest challenge on the programming practice is going to be panic. So people roll their eyes when I say this, but really and truly, when you start the thing or right before you open it up, take a 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, take a deep breath, exhale slowly, and just try to calm your nerves. That really will help. There is also a bit of a style in the programming practice. And so let me just bring up, this is the description of the practice test. And the real one will be written in similar style. So it says you're to write a class string utils, and it has the following public static methods. And then you are to write a class called string play, which has a main in it. And long story short, string play has the user interface, and it calls the string util methods to do what it needs to do. Now, when you approach this, what you want to do is you want to write a little code, test it, write a little code, test it. And even if you need to throw some code away, that's okay. The worst thing you can do is to write code for an hour and a half and then try to test it in 20 minutes. That it never works, okay? So figure on spending a couple extra minutes by looking at the program you've got to write and how it's got to behave and say, okay, how can I decompose this thing so I can write a bit, test a bit, write a bit, and test a bit. It only took the software industry about 40 years to figure out that writing it all and then testing it all was not the right thing to do. So, like I said, there's no one way of decomposing it. There are lots of other ways, lots of ways of decomposing it and writing a bit and testing a bit. I guess the two major ways of looking at this particular program would be either to write and test these methods or to write and test the main where you either didn't call the method or you had a stub of a method that just returned something, and get the main loop right. Either way could be made to work. I would probably write these methods and then write a main, write pad left, then create my string play class, create my main method, and just call pad left and print it out. And if that worked, I could erase those 2 lines and then go do the same thing with pad right. Just call it and print it out. And don't worry about everything the main method has to do. Just get these tools working correctly. And once you do that, you've gotten well over half the program written, and you haven't even needed to read the description very well. You may not even realize what the program's supposed to be doing, but that's okay, because you understood what each of these methods needed to be doing. And you can write them and test them without sweating anything else. So if there are any questions on that, please put them in the chat or speak up, or if you want me to start tackling this program, I can. There's a solution that was published along with the test. Or we can go through the practice test, or if there's a particular lesson that was painful. How are you guys feeling about go through the program? Sure. You want me to go through it, or do you want me to write it from scratch?
You can just go through it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, turns out it's okay. So I'll sort of do both, kind of a hybrid. Here is my solution, and the solution has some extra stuff in it. When I originally did this, I had a few extra methods, and I thought, well, that may be a bit much, so I didn't describe some of these things, although I will talk about this pad left in a moment. So if I was going to do pad left, what it does is pad on the left of a given string with a given character. So I'm given a current string, I'm giving a padding character, and I'm giving the number of times that padding character should be prepended to the left of this string. Oh, excuse me. So start out with an empty string, do a for loop. That will go through, that will execute that number of times. And for each one, I execute the append, and this particular, that plus equals is equivalent to buffer equals, buffer is equivalent to that. Oh, okay. So I just build up however many padding characters I have, and then I concatenate them and return the existing string. So let's assume I've just written that. I would go in string play and just ignore everything that's here for the moment. I would test that with something like string ABC equal ABC, and then I would say string result equal string middles dot pad left, And my current string would be ABC. And I would say, well, let's see if I can put 2, and maybe I want to put X's on it. And so then should be XXABC. And then I would run this. And, you know, we're pretending that all this other junk isn't here, but yes, I did get the expected string returned. So that gives me a pretty good feel of confidence that I've got something right here. And that's how I would develop the program. So does this sort of make some sense?
Yes, it does.
And okay, the method I threw out, I discarded from here, was a different signature. It was an overloaded method, but it didn't have the explicit padding character. It was just to be padded with space characters. Now, something that almost nobody did on the assignment previously, but was perfectly valid and is heavily used in the industry, is this one down here with the 3 parameters is the most general form of this method. And in fact, this restricted form where the padding characters just spaces is sometimes called a utility method or a convenience method. It doesn't give you any more power than the one down here, but it's more convenient for if you just want to pad with spaces. But since it's a special case, you can in fact get that method really, really cheaply by saying, okay, for this call, my padding character is always space, so I'll just call this pad left and supply the explicit padding character there. So in fact, all of those text box string methods, you could take this approach and do the one that had the alternating characters and provide calls to it from the other 3 text box strings method you had to write. I didn't expect that. And in fact, I don't know that I would have recommended it, but it was possible. Okay, so how do you guys feel about methods? Any questions about methods? Do you understand that Java is a call by value language? That's a really big deal. So to go back to here and let me get that stuff out. So for instance, okay, I'll get to that question in just a minute. Since this is call by value, you'll notice I'm passing in a current string here, and I'm setting it here. Except for this setting of that string, there is nothing pad left can do to change current value or num to add. That may be a more interesting 1, because call by value is a one-way copy. Values go in, they don't come out. It's kind of like a Roach Motel in that regard. Things go in, they don't come out. So pad left can return a value. It can be of type string, and I can do this assignment here. But except for doing that assignment, there is nothing pad left could do to change that parameter or that parameter or that parameter. That's a really big deal in call by value. Okay. Okay, about the last lab, a working solution for comparing the last character with the other one. Oh, okay. Right. Okay, let's see if we can go back to my little toy thing. And let's say I have equal 1, and now a lot of people used even odd kinds of things. They said, am I in an even column or am I in an odd column? And I accepted that. It's not my favorite solution. The one I recommend, and there are a couple of other good ones, the more straightforward one that I recommend is to create another variable and initialize it to one of them. And then, let's see, let's just have a loop of 5 so we can see what's going on. And I can do print current. So I can just print that. And now what I can say is if I've just printed C1, next time I want to print C2, right? But if I haven't just printed C1, that means I have just printed C2. So I would then want to, oops. Do that. So let's see if this works. Live programming is always such fun. Yeah. And so I did get 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now notice that here I was using car. Car is primitive. And the fact that it's a primitive is why I can do this equals relationship. Couple of things about relations. The MIM model videos I did talking about non-primitive types, reference types, which are pointing to an object in the heap. Don't use equals to figure out if you're pointing to the same string, for instance, because it's not a primitive, it's a reference type. And sometimes, in fact, I think there's a question about this on the practice test. Sometimes 2 different strings can have the same characters in them, but since they're different strings, equals equals will return false. Dot equals will actually look at the specific characters and say, do these two things have the same characters? And it will work properly. And no, you can't, do not compare strings. Like I said, I think there is, well, first of all, are we okay with how to alternate output like this?
Yes. Can you talk
Okay.
about how you like in that lab, how to get the spaces? I mean, I was able to do it, but I don't know if it was the what you would recommend.
Okay. Let me be lazy and look at my solution. And I don't actually remember what solution I used to alternate characters, so that'll be fun too. Lab static method. And string box, a text box. Okay. And I told you guys not to have that. And you can see this is how I actually wrote these guys first, which is, if I had been in the industry, I would have started with the simplest one and worked my way up. But then I would have gone back when I got this one working, I would have gone back and replaced these things just because it cuts maintenance down so much and cuts ongoing debugging down so much. Testing and debugging and maintenance are huge costs. And did I use, okay, yes, I used the solution that that I was talking to you guys about. And where you wanted to print a character was either let me just go and change this. I will refactor this and call this on a laptop, and I hate it when it does that. Current column. Nope, it's not current column. That's current row. And this is current column. This will make this a little. I've written too much C code, and being cryptic is just a big part of my problems. So when I want to print a character is either when I'm on the first row or when I'm on the last row or when I'm in the first column or when I'm in the last column. Otherwise, I want to print a space. Now, and that's down here. This else is related to that if. And this is the alternating character stuff that I just showed you a minute ago. So does that answer that question? There is no equals 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 operator in Java. So when it comes to strings, you really do want to use dot equals. I think I might be able to come up. The Java compiler is really, really efficient and It does all sorts of optimizations, which under the covers makes sometimes makes equals work, but that's not a general solution. And so let me see if I can force it to mess up. String complete equal Sophie, Sally, Jack. They were my dachshunds, by the way. Now, string. Oh, the easiest way to do this is just going to be to create a scanner. Oh, come on. Import scanner. And then I can do this. And then I'll say no. Complete equals. Is that right? Okay. So does anybody see where I screwed this up? Okay. So let's run this guy again. Oh, and I will copy Sophie, Sally, and Jack just so I can't mess up typing it back in. And so equals is false, but dot equals is true. And again, I'll go back to that those mem model videos explain how the heap works and all that stuff. But let's now the other problem people have with this and what I want to do here is just copy that because it'll be confusing if I don't, is they don't understand the alias. And what I want to do here is copy this. And this will be complete equals alias. And so if I run this guy again, oops. Now you see that complete equals alias is true. They are pointing to the same object. And again, in those, that GUI string set of videos on the heap and how objects are stored in the heap and everything is really critical to understanding how objects work. And nobody ever watches them, but that's okay. But strings are immutable, so I can't change a string once it's made. I can assign a new value to it, but I can't change it once. I can't change that object itself. But there are some objects like JTextField, which I can change. And so if I have a situation which is an alias, as I do here, then I can change it either using that reference or this reference. It wouldn't matter, but the object would be changed. And since these guys are aliases, they would both see that change, including the guy who wasn't involved in the change. And those videos walk through that. So just that's important. Hope this is helping. But pointers are a really big deal. Java has pointers. This is a pointer. The language just doesn't let you get at it like C or C++ do. What else? Oh. Well, I will. I will see if I'm having troubles. It's really inconsiderate of me to have the review when the textbook was down. Hello? I know they had a maintenance window coming up, but I thought it was in the wee hours. And I seem to be having trouble getting to it as well. No, I can't get to it. Sorry about that. So we should all move to our phones. Okay, let me see. How are you feeling with loops? For the phone app, I think you can just probably search on Pearson or Revel. How are you feeling with loops? Because, in other words, this, for just to pick on this loop, loops can go up or down. Now that changes where you start and where you finish. They do not have to go up or down by 1. They could go up or down by 2 or any number, okay? So please be familiar with loops. That's one reason I did the text box string the way I did, to get you familiar with nested loops and so forth. Oh, the post-test loop. If you want to use the do while post-test loop, the only thing I want you to know about pre-test versus post-test loops is that in a pre-test loop, you might not get into the loop body at all, because if this had been initialized to 6, 6 is not less than 5, so I would have skipped the body. In a post-test loop, you go through the body of the loop once, and then you test to see if you should go back at the end to see if you should go back through the body. That's all I want you to know about pre-test and post-test loops. If you want to use do while loops, go for it. There's nothing wrong with them. I've looked at a lot of people's code in the industry over the years in various languages, and I would say that well over 99% of the loops I've seen and nearly 100% of the loops I've written have all been pre-test loops. So post-test loops, like I said, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that nobody uses them. So that's why I want you to know the idea, but in practice, beyond knowing what the idea is, they're just really not used that much. And I think part of it is you guys have probably already hit the there are so many moving parts on this that you really are looking to simplify things just to keep your brain from exploding. And post-test loops are one thing that we can throw out of our brain, not worry about it, and we don't miss anything. I think that's what's going on. I know that's what's going on with me, the reason I don't use them. I will say that when you need something like that, the book describes something called a sentinel loop pattern, which, do I have an example of that? Oh, I think it's in the lecture. Let me see. Arrays, events, if statement, inheritance. Wow, where is my loops lecture? Think. Maybe there'll be something in the arrays. For loops are used heavily with arrays. This sort of thing just makes arrays a whole lot easier to think about. And what's this? Okay. This is where we are making. Okay, but none of these are sentinel controlled loops. Although you guys don't need to know how to reverse an array yet. I'll torture you with that in a couple of weeks. Okay. This is stuff I go over for lectures. Talking about reversing. Okay, so the pattern, I'll just write one, that'll be faster. The pattern for a sentinel control loop is we do something to prime the loop. And usually, I want to get rid of that. And usually it's a sentinel is a flag. And so here I'm going to use a string sentinel which has the value X. So and often I will use a while. And so this will be, I want to loop if the sentinel is not X. And then we have some processing. That's not much processing, but it'll work. And then we have the update read, which is pretty much like the prime. You can think of the priming the loop as like a priming the pump. And we will change that just trivially. We declare things exactly once in Java, no more, no less. And we will do that. And I will go on and close that because it's going to whine at me if I don't. And let's see. Can I run this? So, hello, bye, la-di-da. I can do this all day, but I'm tired, and so I'll enter X. So that's how a sentinel controlled loop works. And this update is usually the last thing in the loop body. Okay? Any questions about this? Questions about other stuff? Well, thank you. Now, what is that in language terms? And there's several answers, so. Okay, yes, it's a loop conditional or a condition. A condition is an expression that evaluates to a Boolean value. What is that? It's also a condition. What's the difference? I mean, I know this one is in an if statement and this one is in a loop, but aside from their location, which is just an accident of how that program's written, aside from their location, is there any fundamental difference between the condition of a loop and the condition of an if statement? And it turns out there's not, okay? So let's see, what else do we need to talk about? By the way, some people came in late. This is being recorded. So, and I'll try to figure out how to make that available. That'll be an exciting thing. Everything else trying to use Teams for the first time has been exciting. So, let's see, what have we covered? There are two fundamental reasons for using methods. In other languages, exactly the same construct is sometimes called a function, sometimes called a subroutine, sometimes called a procedure. In one language, I know the same construct is called a signal. In object-oriented languages, they are called methods. But those other terms are exactly the same idea. So there are two major reasons that I would say we use methods. One is psychological. You probably already hit the point where there are so many of these statements running around that you get lost in the forest because of all those stinking trees. One thing methods let us do is work out the logic of something, slap a name on those statements, and then we don't have to think about it so hard anymore. If we want a string of a text box string, the only thing we have to remember is the name of the method and what the parameters are and how that alternation is done and how we get rows and columns and all that stuff and what's space and what's a real character printed. We don't worry about that. We just need to remember what the name is and what the parameter list is. And our tools will help us with the parameter list. So one reason for methods is psychological. It helps us keep our brain from exploding. The other reason is resources. And so for that text box string lab, if I had to, let's see, what was it? String text box test. Yes, this is my tester. If I was, no, wait, that looks like, Okay, this is some of my test stuff for text box string, which brings up another point that I'll get to in a moment. But if I was copying code for all this stuff, I would have copies of that same piece of code many times in my program, whereas I just have it once here. And so the computer can use that one copy of the code time and time again without replicating those statements over and over and over. So it significantly saves us resources in the computer because we don't replicate code. It's referred to as code bloat. And you can see the way I use to test this stuff. This is why we get so hung up, or well, the entire programming community gets so hung up on, you got to get the name exactly right. And since it's a case sensitive language, the case has to be right too. And you have to get the parameters exactly right, because that determines what method's going to be called and so forth. So yes, I know that programmers are pains in the butt to deal with, but there really are reasons that all this stuff has to line up perfectly, because a surprisingly common problem with this text box class name is people write test box with an S instead of an X. Real easy problem to have, real hard problem to discover. But it really is important to get these things right, because otherwise multiple programmers can't link up their code into bigger programs. And that's what software is all about. Almost nobody's doing anything of significant size alone. It's just, that's not how it's done. So that was something else I wanted to mention. Okay, what else? By the way, we're starting. Methods are our start to having a little more fun. In theoretical terms, we have three control structures that we've studied thus far. And in fact, in Java, they are the only three control structures in Java and in most modern languages. They are referred to as sequence. You got to do things in the right order. Selection, or if statements, and loops, or fors and whiles. With those three control structures, we can compute anything that can be computed. Now, that's a very awkward sentence. It turns out, if anyone's heard of Alan Turing, there are some things that we just can't compute. Really good questions. And yes, we will get to callbacks when we do event processing later on, very late in the course. But so you say, well, if I can do anything that we can do with those three control structures, what more do I need? Why do I have this other 95% of Java? And the reason is things like methods conserve computer resources, and they conserve our sanity, because we don't have to be thinking in so many nuts and bolts consistently. After the midterm, we will get to arrays, and that we will do two things in starting to organize data. One's an array, and the other one's called an array list. Organizing data is really the heart and soul of computer science. All these statement things, yeah, we do those, but organizing data, the structure of data is a much bigger deal. So we've gotten to methods now. We're going to do a little bit of organizing data, and right after arrays, we make the jump into object space, and that it just keeps getting better from here on. It does get more abstract, but anyway. And yes, the lesson on event processing will be using callbacks. That's the general mechanism for catching events. We will go back to the widget viewer. There are ways that we can use widget viewer to define callbacks for event processing. Other questions? I know I asked this question earlier, but some people have joined since then. Did anybody have particular problems with the practice test or the practice program? Again, for the practice program, take a few seconds to calm yourself before opening it up. And that's true of the test too. That's true of any test. That's what I do when I take a test. And for the practice program, take a few extra minutes, couple of extra minutes, bust it up into smaller things that you can code test, code test, code test. Again, many years ago, we used to give a programming part on the final exam, which we don't anymore. We consider the project to replace that. But I have seen people on the final exam spend 3/4 of their time writing code, and then not be able to debug it in the last few minutes because they had forgotten what they did an hour and a half ago. And they did terribly on the programming part and basically flunked the entire course because of how things were working out. Whereas I think if they had code test, code test, code test, they would have gotten a significantly better score on the programming part. So that's one of those pieces of advice that I just hang my head when students don't follow. Okay, sure. Got a few more minutes. Any last questions? Okay. That's pretty much gone through what I was thinking. So I guess I'll say going once. Going twice. Okay, well, thank you guys for showing up, and hope this has helped. And I will try to get the recording And I will also put this, put that little thing out on Blackboard for what it's worth. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later. Bye.
Rick.